Right now, a single drone strike in the Mediterranean is actively dictating the price of a bag of flour in Gaza.
Yeah, it sounds almost impossible when you first hear it.
It really does. I mean, the traditional map of global warfare, where crises are contained neatly inside drawn borders, is just dead.
Completely dead.
You look at the news, you see a hot spot, and you expect the geopolitical fallout to stay inside that little circle on the map.
All right.
But then you encounter a situation where the architecture of global security just instantly rewires itself.
Because in a hyper-connected world, distance doesn't equal safety.
Right.
It just dictates how long the shockwave takes to hit you. We are seeing an epicenter in one region completely crack the economic and military foundations of continents that are literally thousands of miles away.
Which is exactly our mission today. We're taking a massive stack of urgent reports that have been crossing the wires. I mean, spanning from exclusive Euronews diplomatic interviews to urgent UN Security Council briefings, all the way to raw data from AP News.
And we are synthesizing all of that for you.
Exactly. Our goal on this deep dive is to understand the cascading global effects of the intense military escalation that began on February 28th. And we need to be incredibly clear up front.
Yes, very clear.
We are not here to take any political sides. When you are dealing with deeply polarizing global actors, the most vital thing we can do for you is simply follow the facts where they lead.
Just mapping out the reality on the ground so you have the whole picture.
To map that reality, well, we have to look at the catalyst. On February 28th, U.S. and Israeli forces launched an attack that resulted in the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
And that specific event was the flashpoint.
Right.
In the 3 weeks since that day, the response has fundamentally altered the geography of modern conflict. It just hasn't stayed localized.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where the map starts to blur in a really alarming way. We are seeing the potential expansion of the conflict zone directly into Europe.
And it starts with a very specific diplomatic threat. A threat that forces us to look at an exclusive interview Euronews recently conducted with Iran's ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva, Ali Bahraini.
And what did he say exactly?
Ambassador Bahraini issued an unambiguous warning. He stated that any military installation or any base used to attack Iran is now considered a legitimate target for their military forces.
Which, I mean, historically, targeting a base that attack you is pretty standard rules of engagement, right?
It is, but Ambassador Bahraini explicitly added that this policy extends to, and I'm quoting here, any site that is in Europe.
Any site that is in Europe, I mean, let that sink in. We aren't talking about isolated airstrips in the desert here.
Not at all.
Imagine you were stationed at one of the roughly 40 different U.S. military bases scattered across the European continent. We're talking about tens of thousands of troops.
Tens of thousands. And the reports show that several of these European bases have already been acting as logistical hubs.
Right. They've been supporting operations since this war began.
And by providing that logistical support, those European installations are stripped of their status as safe rear echelon bases.
Because a rear echelon base usually handles, what, intelligence gathering?
Intelligence, refueling, supply chain stuff far away from the front lines. But Tehran is essentially saying those functions make you an active combatant now.
Placing you firmly on the chessboard.
Exactly.
It's almost like the geopolitical equivalent of a supply chain hack. You don't launch a frontal assault on a heavily fortified mainframe. You go after the third-party vendor in Europe that's quietly supplying the data and the resources.
You hit the network where it's exposed.
But I have to push back here for a second. We see authoritarian governments project strength for their domestic audiences all the time, you know? Like, is this just diplomatic bluster?
It's a fair question.
Are we supposed to believe they're actually going to rewrite the rules of engagement and physically strike European soil?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the distinction between diplomatic bluster and a genuine tactical directive, it actually doesn't matter to a defense minister in Berlin or Rome.
Wait, why wouldn't it matter?
Because the mere articulation of the threat forces a physical reality. Think about the mechanics of European domestic security. If an adversary publicly states your territory is a target, you cannot leave your air defense systems in standby mode. You just can't.
Oh, I see. You have to actively mobilize.
Exactly. You have to scramble interceptor jets, elevate the threat readiness of your civilian populations, and burn millions of dollars a day just maintaining a defensive posture.
So the threat alone exerts this massive economic and psychological toll.
Right, because the distance between a spoken threat and an actual missile strike is practically non-existent with modern technology.
Which brings us to the physical evidence.
Yeah.
Because the ambassador's warning isn't just theory anymore, is it?
No, it's not. We have actual hardware moving through the sky, crossing borders that haven't been crossed before.
Yeah, we have crossed a major threshold from diplomatic warnings into kinetic action.
And when we say kinetic action, we mean real physical weapons hitting physical targets, not just cyber attacks or economic sanctions.
And the first major instance of this was an Iranian-made drone successfully attacking a British military base located in Cyprus.
Which is a massive deal.
Huge. I mean, when you hit Cyprus, you are not just clipping some remote outpost in the Mediterranean. That is EU territory.
You are physically dragging the European Union into the crosshairs.
And the immediate ripple effect of that was the UK responding by opening its bases to US defensive counterattacks.
Which essentially forces a tighter military integration of Western forces. It creates this involuntary escalation trap.
Right, but an even more significant threshold was crossed shortly after that Cyprus strike, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. NATO air defense systems actually intercepted 2 Iranian ballistic missiles that were heading toward Turkish airspace.
I mean, just let that sink in. Iranian ballistic missiles intercepted over NATO airspace, that is a line that Tehran had not previously crossed.
It's a direct test of the NATO alliance's defensive umbrella.
And obviously, NATO has been aggressively trying to manage the public panic around this.
Oh, absolutely. A spokesperson for the Supreme Allied Powers Europe went on Euronews to reassure the public.
Saying what?
Stating that the alliance has the capability to neutralize any such threat. They are really trying to project an image of an impenetrable shield.
But there is a massive gap between a PR statement about a shield and the cold, hard math of missile technology.
A very big gap. Analysts are pointing directly to Iran's arsenal, specifically the Khorramshahr ballistic missile.
And this is the one with the crazy range, right?
Yes, we are talking about a weapon boasting a range of up to 3,000 kilometers.
Wow. And 3,000 kilometers completely changes the geopolitical math.
It really does. That range puts capital cities as far away as Berlin and Rome comfortably within striking distance from Iranian territory.
And the physics of a ballistic missile re-entering the atmosphere, I mean, you have mere minutes of warning.
Literally minutes. So when NATO says they can neutralize the threat, the unspoken mechanical reality is that they have to neutralize it perfectly.
Right, because if they miss even one.
Exactly. Their air defense tracking has to be flawless every single time, because a single payload slipping through reaches the heart of Europe.
Which makes a recent statement from Washington seem almost bizarre to me, given everything we just talked about.
You're talking about the defense secretary's comments.
Yeah, just this Friday, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated that since the conflict began, Iran's missile firepower has decreased by 90%.
And he said their drone strikes are down by 95%.
Right. He put those numbers out there while acknowledging the ongoing threat, but still.
It's a tricky balance.
I understand the desire to show progress, I really do. But I seriously question the psychology of publicizing those statistics as a victory metric.
How so?
Well, if their firepower is truly depleted by 90%, how are ballistic missiles still reaching Turkish airspace? I mean, does a 90% reduction even matter if the remaining 10% can still hit Rome?
It doesn't. And that highlights the fundamental flaw in how we measure asymmetric warfare.
Right.
In a conventional war between 2 massive armies, destroying 90% of the enemy's tanks means you win.
Game over.
But in an asymmetrical conflict, the weaker power knows they can't match NATO weapon for weapon, so they rely on asymmetric leverage.
You don't need 1,000 missiles to alter global security.
Exactly. You just need one with a 3,000-kilometer range and the political will to fire it at a European base.
So the hardware might be mathematically depleted, but the strategic intent to hold those bases hostage remains entirely intact.
That's spot on. And if you are losing the sky, you change the battlefield.
Which brings us to the transition of power. Following the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei on February 28th, leadership transitioned to his son.
Ayatollah Khamenei.
Right. Yeah. Now, we haven't seen him physically. He hasn't made a public appearance. But he issued a written statement, didn't he?
Yes. He vowed to shift the conflict's focus to a highly specific, devastating tactic.
The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
It is the ultimate pivot to geographic leverage. If your conventional missile capability is depleted, you move to the sea where you hold the structural advantage.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because this is the exact mechanism that connects a drone strike in Cyprus to the price of your groceries.
The physical to the economic.
Exactly. We are transitioning from the military threat of ballistic missiles in Europe to an immediate, suffocating economic crisis.
Let's look at the raw data provided by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development regarding the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, lay the numbers on us.
In February, before this escalation really took hold, an average of 129 vessels were passing through that strait every single day.
These are massive cargo ships, oil tankers, the lifeblood of the global supply chain.
Right. By March 9th, that number plummeted to just 4 vessels.
4 vessels, down from 129.
It's unprecedented.
That is a 97% reduction in traffic through one of the most critical maritime corridors on the planet. I mean, it's like pinching the global economy's carotid artery.
And we need to explain the mechanism behind that 97% drop, because it's not like the strait is physically walled off with concrete.
Right. There's no giant gate. So how does it work?
The blockade actually works through the financial markets.
Really?
Yeah. When a new supreme leader threatens the strait, maritime insurance companies, like Lloyd's of London, they panic.
Oh, of course. The insurance.
They instantly spike the war risk premiums for any commercial vessel entering those waters.
So it's a financial blockade.
Almost overnight, it becomes economically unviable for a shipping company to send a cargo vessel through the strait. Even if the water is technically navigable, they can't afford the risk.
You're literally being priced out of the ocean.
Exactly. So what did the shipping companies do? They refuse to enter the system entirely.
They have to reroute.
They reroute their massive fleets around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa.
Which is a huge detour.
It adds weeks to the journey. It burns hundreds of thousands of dollars in extra fuel per ship. It requires way more crew time.
And those massive, unexpected costs do not just vanish into thin air.
No, they don't.
They get passed down. The shipping company charges the distributor more. The distributor charges the wholesaler more, and the wholesaler charges the local market more.
The cost cascades down the chain until it hits the absolute most vulnerable end consumer.
Which brings us to the humanitarian toll. Tom Fletcher, the UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, delivered a deeply concerning briefing to the Security Council this Friday.
It was a very grim report.
He stressed that the safe passage of humanitarian cargo, specifically through the Gaza Strip, is on the verge of total collapse.
Because the ripple effects of that 97% drop in the Strait of Hormuz are just brutal.
Yeah, AP News reported the data citing Fletcher's remarks. Globally, shipping costs are up 16% year over year across the board.
And that's just the global average.
Right. The most devastating metric is inside Gaza, where the price of flour, which is, the most basic fundamental staple of survival, has skyrocketed by 270%.
A 270% increase for a basic bag of flour. It's horrifying. It perfectly illustrates how an asymmetric naval blockade isn't just about, delaying iPhones or messing with corporate supply chains.
No.
The geographic leverage being exercised by Tehran translates directly into hyperinflation for populations that are already relying on aid to survive.
But the statistic from Fletcher's briefing that really stopped me in my tracks was the timeline.
Is 6 months?
Yes. He warned that the ongoing closures in the strait could result in delays of up to 6 months for the delivery of humanitarian aid. I mean, how does 3 weeks of military conflict buy us half a year of delays?
Because global shipping is not a continuous conveyor belt. It is a highly choreographed, tightly scheduled system.
Okay, so when it breaks?
When you suddenly reroute thousands of vessels around Africa, you displace millions of shipping containers to the wrong side of the globe.
Ah, so they aren't where they need to be.
Right. The destination ports in Europe get congested because ships arrive off schedule. Meanwhile, the empty containers don't make it back to the origin ports in time to be refilled.
The entire rhythm of global logistics shatters.
Even if the conflict ended tomorrow, it would take 6 months just to physically move the empty metal boxes back to where they belong so the aid system could function normally again.
The institutions simply can't keep up. The United Nations is demanding safe passage, but a bureaucratic resolution moves at a crawl compared to the instant reality of a spiked insurance premium or a ballistic missile.
The military reality has violently dictated a new economic reality.
And the humanitarian sector is just caught in the crossfire. They're completely unable to navigate this new landscape where the property lines of global conflict have been erased.
They're trying to operate in a system that no longer exists.
So what does this all mean? If you step back and look at the massive stack of reports we've covered today, we are witnessing a dual-natured escalation.
A two-front crisis, really.
Right. On one hand, you have a rapid geographic military expansion. You have ballistic missiles reaching Turkish airspace, drones hitting EU territory in Cyprus, and explicit diplomatic threats that place European capital cities and dozens of U.S. military bases directly in the crosshairs.
And then on the other hand,
you have an economic and humanitarian chokehold at the Strait of Hormuz that is starving the global shipping system, creating massive container displacements, and spiking the cost of essential survival goods by 270%.
it is a synchronized weaponization of both physical geography and global economics.
And as we promised at the top of the deep dive, we aren't here to tell you who is right or who is wrong in this deeply polarizing conflict. Our goal is to simply map out how the mechanisms of our world actually work under pressure.
Because to navigate the news right now, you really need to understand the invisible thread that connects everything.
Yeah, connecting a drone strike on a Mediterranean island to an empty cargo container in an Asian port, and ultimately to the price of flour in Gaza. You have to see the underlying mechanisms to understand the reality of what's happening.
And as you absorb the reality of those mechanisms, I want to leave you with one final thought to consider.
Let's hear it.
Think about that 6-month delay in humanitarian aid caused by merely 3 weeks of conflict. If the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz transitions from a temporary military tactic into a permanent geopolitical reality under this new leadership, how resilient is our global supply chain, really?
That's a huge question.
If the fate of millions of people and the stability of global markets relies so heavily on a single, highly contested waterway, are we just looking at a temporary crisis, or are we witnessing the beginning of a fundamentally divided, permanently fractured global economy?
It makes you wonder if those shattered maps we talked about at the beginning, if those erased lines are ever going to be drawn back the way they were, or if the system is forever changed.
Time will tell.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources today. It is a heavy topic, but understanding the mechanisms behind the headlines is the first step. Keep asking the hard questions. Look past the obvious data points. And as always, stay curious.